how did we get from where we were to where we are now?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a very good question, very important one as well. It's always important to take a step back and kind of look at the larger picture to see where we are. Because if you just jump straight into the current discourse, it's very difficult to get your bearings, right? Because it's, first of all, it's very emotionally charged. Second of all, the language and the concepts are already ready-made for you.
Yes.
And you need to be able to critique those before you can engage in it constructively. And one of the challenges that we face as Muslims is that the underlying assumptions have shifted so radically over the last, I'll say 50 years since the sexual, it's 55 years now since the sexual revolution. Let's put it around 1967, 60s, but late 60s is really when it starts ramping up. The underlying assumptions have shifted so radically that positions that were just totally intuitive and natural to the vast majority of people just one generation ago, right, are now incomprehensible
Mm.
to the younger generation because they've been, raised on a completely different paradigm and notion of what like sex and sexuality even are. So let's just go. So I think a watershed moment in this whole thing, as I've intimated, is the sexual revolution, right, of the 1960s. Before this time, now the birth control pill comes out, I believe, in 1959. And this is very much a catalyst for changing attitudes towards sexuality, as well as like second wave feminism starts at that time. Um, and you have other movements going on in the 1960s. And so there's this sort of this effervescence within Western culture. And when it comes to sexuality in particular, so you have changing gender roles and kind of challenging of traditional gender roles and stereotypes. At the same time, there's kind of a rejection of Christian sexual morality, which up until that time was basically normative in Western society. It doesn't mean it was always perfectly adhered to, but the official kind of, view of society was sex outside of marriage is wrong. No one would ever tell you anything other than in school or in a church, obviously. Uh, uh, Girls who got pregnant outside of marriage in the 1950s and before was a huge stigma. They would go off like, oh, she's visiting grandma for 7 months or whatever, off at some home probably till she gives birth to the baby, puts it up for adoption, and then comes back. Everyone kind of knows where, why she went to grandma for so long, but it was like hush hush, right? These were very kind of, in the 1960s, as I pointed out in another podcast, even on daytime public television, like these soap operas, they couldn't even say the word pregnant. It was, she is expecting or with baby or, with child or whatever, euphemisms. There's nothing wrong with saying pregnant from an Islamic perspective, but I'm just saying even that was considered like too forward. Like, no, these are very kind of personal issues and one should have decorum about them in the public sphere. So there was a revolt against, this for many reasons.